Whoopi Goldberg was ready to challenge Karoline Leavitt's arguments, but Karoline turned the tables, leaving Whoopi struggling for a response on live TV. From the moment the cameras started rolling, there was a certain tension in the room, something you could feel even through the screen. The audience of the view was buzzing, anticipating a heated debate. This wasn't just any guest. It was Karoline Leavitt, a rising conservative voice known for standing her ground. And she was facing off against Whoopi Goldberg, a woman famous for her sharp wit, strong opinions, and unapologetic attitude. Whoopi leaned forward, locking eyes with Karoline. "Let me just say this right now," she began, her voice firm and controlled. "The problem with this push against wokeness," she made air quotes with her fingers, "is that without it, women wouldn't be where they are today. Civil rights wouldn't have advanced a lot. The freedoms people enjoy today wouldn't exist without past movements." The audience clapped and some even cheered. Whoopi sat back, letting the moment sink in, but Karoline didn't flinch. She waited for the applause to fade before speaking. "Whoopi, I respect your passion," she said, her voice calm but firm. "But the issue isn't people wanting equality. The problem is that wokeness has been twisted into something that punishes those who think differently. People are losing jobs, being silenced, and treated like criminals just for having conservative values." A low murmur spread through the audience. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. "So, you're saying accountability is a problem?" She shot back. Karoline shook her head. "I'm saying there's a difference between accountability and mob rule. Look at the economy. Look at the state of the country. People are struggling more now than they did a few years ago. But instead of addressing real issues, the conversation always goes back to identity politics." Whoopi folded her arms. "And why do you think that is?" Karoline took a breath and sat up straighter. "Because it's a distraction. It's easier to argue about pronouns than to talk about inflation. It's easier to divide people than to fix real problems. And the worst part, the people pushing this so-called progress are the same ones living in million-dollar homes, sending their kids to private schools, while everyday working-class Americans are left dealing with the consequences." That struck a nerve. Some audience members nodded, while others shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi chuckled and shook her head. "You know, that's the thing about people in politics. You talk a big game about the people, but at the end of the day, the folks at the top, including your party, don't actually care about the little guy either." Karoline smirked. "You mean like how Hollywood celebrities talk about oppression while flying in private jets?" The room reacted. Some gasped, some laughed, and the energy shifted. Whoopi waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, come on. That's the oldest talking point in the book." Karoline shrugged. "Doesn't mean it's not true." The tension was thick, the conversation balancing between a debate and something far more intense. Both women understood the game pushed too far, too fast, and you lose the audience. There was an art to this, a rhythm, and this was just the beginning. But things were about to take a turn, and the gloves were coming off. Whoopi adjusted her glasses, leaned back with her arms crossed, and said, "All right, Karoline, let's talk about this. You say wokeness is a distraction, but let's be real. If people hadn't fought for change, women like you wouldn't even be sitting here today." The audience clapped again, with a few cheers. Karoline gave a small, unfazed smile. "And I appreciate those fights, but Whoopi, here's the thing. Fighting for rights isn't the same as forcing a political agenda down people's throats. There's a difference between pushing for fairness and pushing for total control over what people can say, think, and believe." Whoopi scoffed. "So now being socially aware is control? That's the problem with conservatives. You all think accountability is oppression." Karoline tilted her head slightly, keeping her voice steady. "No, accountability is one thing. But let's talk about reality. If someone on the left says something controversial, they get a pass. If a conservative does, they're fired, banned, and labeled a bigot. Look at how people who questioned COVID policies were treated. Look at how parents who protested at school board meetings were called domestic terrorists. Is that fairness? Or is that silencing people who don't agree with the narrative?" The crowd stirred, some murmured in agreement, while others shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi shook her head. "Oh, come on. That's an exaggeration. Karoline raised an eyebrow. Is it? Because just last year, a teacher in California fired a teacher for refusing to use preferred pronouns. A father in Virginia was arrested for speaking out at a school board meeting after his daughter was assaulted in a bathroom by a student who claimed to be transgender. And let's not forget about journalists being censored for questioning the origins of COVID. But sure, Whoopi, tell me again how cancel culture isn't real. That landed even Joy Behar, who had been silent so far, shifted in her seat. Whoopi exhaled, rolling her eyes. You know, I find it funny how conservatives love to play the victim. Karoline leaned forward slightly. And I find it funny how liberals claim to be tolerant until someone disagrees with them. The audience reacted, some laughed, some booed. Whoopi narrowed her eyes. You act like the right is innocent in all this. Your party wants to ban books, control women's bodies and tell people how to live their lives, but you want to cry about being silenced. Karoline didn't miss a beat. And the left wants to indoctrinate kids, erase biological reality and force compliance through social pressure and censorship. Tell me, Whoopi, if this is all about freedom and progress, why do people get fired for stating basic facts? Why are comedians apologizing for jokes? Why is it suddenly controversial to say men and women are different? Whoopi opened her mouth but hesitated. For a split second, Karoline caught it. See that pause right there. That's because even you know there's a line, and your side keeps moving it. The audience reaction was mixed. Some clapped, others groaned. Whoopi shook her head, trying to regain control. Karoline, here's the thing. Every generation pushes boundaries. The things that were controversial 30 years ago are normal now. That's progress. Karoline nodded. Sure, but at what point does progress become a weapon? At what point does forcing people to accept an ideology cross the line into authoritarianism? Whoopi sighed, rubbing her forehead. Oh Lord. Karoline leaned back, crossing her arms. What, to real? Whoopi forced a smile. No, just predictable. Karoline shrugged. Predictable or uncomfortable? Whoopi stared at Karoline for a moment, then turned to the audience. You see what they do. They come on these shows, talk real smooth, act all reasonable, but what they really want is to turn back the clock. And we're not going back. The audience erupted into cheers and Whoopi let them have their moment. Karoline simply smiled, waiting. Then, as the noise settled, she spoke. Nobody's trying to go backward, Whoopi. But maybe some of us don't think progress means erasing common sense. The air grew thick with tension. Even the other hosts seemed unsure of what to say next. But this was only the beginning. Things were about to get personal. Whoopi let out a short laugh, shaking her head. You know, I've been doing this a long time. Karoline, I've seen people come and go, spouting the same nonsense about how common sense is under attack. But here's what I don't get. Why? Is it always conservatives who feel so oppressed when the world changes? Karoline rested her hands on the table. Because, Whoopi, it's not about change. It's about how that change is being forced. People are being told they have to accept things that go against reality, or else they risk losing their job, their reputation, their ability to speak freely, all because they refuse to go along with an ideology. Whoopi raised an eyebrow. You keep using the word forced. No one is forcing anything on anyone. Karoline leaned in slightly. Oh, really? Then why are parents being labeled bigots for wanting a say in what their kids are taught? Why are people afraid to state biological facts? Why did a man in New York lose his job just for refusing to put pronouns in his email signature? Whoopi waved her hand dismissively. Oh please, conservatives love playing the victim. You wanna talk about being silenced? Try being black in America. Try being a woman in a man's world. Try actually living with the consequences of the policies your side pushes. Karoline didn't even blink. You want to talk about consequences, Whoopi? Okay, let's talk about crime. Let's talk about inflation. Let's talk about